No one calls 911 over a parked car unless they're trying to start a war. And Karen, she picked the wrong battlefield. The evening air over Willow Ridge tasted like rain and lawn chemicals. Sprinklers clicked in perfect HOA rhythm while porch. Lights blinked on one by one, a neat row of fireflies trained to obey. I just eased my slate-gray SUV into my driveway, 2 inches shy of the sidewalk, no curb block, no rule broken, when the familiar staccato heels announced themselves on concrete. Karen. She materialized with a clipboard like it was a badge of royalty, chin high, lips pressed into the kind of thin line only found on warning labels. Her eyes landed on the SUV, slid along the roof rack, paused on the dash-mounted camera, then cut to me. "You can't park that here," she said, voice bright and brittle, like a glass Christmas ornament about to crack. Section 4.2. No industrial or enforcement-style vehicles in visible areas. We've talked about, what is that thing? Equipment. She jabbed her pen at the camera. "Dash cam," I said. "For safety." "We don't need your kind of safety here." She clicked her pen, already scribbling. "Keys. You'll move it into your garage and you'll register it with the HOA. Or I'll call the police and have it towed." I studied her for a quiet beat, the way I've learned to measure people. Breathing rate, eye flicks, tells. Her right hand trembled. Adrenaline. The pen left a groove in the paper. Anger. The angle of her body, blocking, not negotiating. She'd already decided we were enemies. "Respectfully, Karen, there's nothing in the bylaws that uses the phrase enforcement style," I said, pulling up the PDF on my phone. I had it bookmarked, highlighted, annotated. "And towing requires prior notice. That," she snapped, pointing the pen like a miniature spear, "is what I decide." "No," I said simply. "It isn't." Neighbors sensed the electricity and drifted to their porches like moths to the porchlight drama. A lawnmower stuttered to a halt. Someone's golden retriever whined from an open window. Across the street, Mr. Patel leaned against his mailbox, eyes careful. Beside him, Maya from 12B held up her phone. Not too high, not too obvious, but filming. Karen's nostrils flared, the signal before the storm. "Last chance. Give me your keys so I can comply on your behalf." I felt the quiet click in my head, the one that slides into place when a scene shifts from neighborly dispute to something I might need on record later. I thumbed my phone's side button twice. The screen flashed and audio recording began. "No," I said. "You're not entitled to my vehicle, my keys, or an inspection." She stared long enough to convince herself of her next move. Then she dialed. 911, she said loudly, for the audience. "Yes, hello. This is a homeowner in Willow Ridge. There's a suspicious vehicle in a driveway. The driver is refusing to identify himself and appears to have surveillance equipment installed. I feel threatened." A muscle ticked in my jaw. She knew exactly which words made dispatch sit up straighter. "Ma'am," the operator's voice carried just enough to reach me through the open speaker. "Are there weapons present?" Karen's eyes flicked to the SUV, hungry for a lie that could stick. I can't confirm, but it looks like tactical gear." Maya's eyebrows shot up. She zoomed in. I stepped closer, calm, palms visible. "Dispatch, my name is Daniel Cole. I live at 48 Willow Ridge. There are no weapons. I'm standing on my driveway, unarmed and cooperative. I'm happy to show identification to responding officers." I kept my tone steady, neutral. Cops don't like surprises. Neither do I. Karen snapped the speaker off and cradled the phone to her ear, eyes never leaving mine. "Send them fast," she whispered, as if this were a crisis with a countdown. The sprinkler line turned off down the block, plunging the cul-de-sac into a soft, expectant hush. I could feel the neighborhood holding its breath, that peculiar suburban silence that sounds like shutters clicking and texts spiraling through group chats. "Daniel," Mr. Patel said gently, "do you want me to call the board president?" Not her," he added quickly, nodding at Karen. "The real one." Karen's smile cut thin. "I am the acting president, Mr. Patel, and in this community, we do not tolerate threats to safety." "Parking in my own driveway," I said, "isn't a threat." "It is when it intimidates," she said, eyes sliding to the dash cam again like it was a loaded question. She took a step closer, voice pitched for the crowd. "What are you hiding, Daniel?" I let the question hang. Sometimes silence does more work than a speech. Inside my pocket, my wallet felt heavier than it was. Card leather against leather, the metal crest cool as a winter coin. I'd learned a long time ago that titles land better when the ground is ready. 2 minutes later, fast enough to prove Karen's vocabulary had worked, blue strobes washed the hydrangeas in a nervous pulse. A patrol cruiser rolled to a stop, by the curb. The engine ticked as it cooled. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, one older, eyes mapped with years, one younger, trying not to look green, hands visible, shoulders relaxed, stance open. The choreography is always the same. "Evening," the older officer said, scanning faces, reading the air. "We got a call about a disturbance and a suspicious vehicle." His gaze settled on the SUV, then on me. "You, the homeowner?" "Yes." "Sir," I said, "Daniel Cole. This is my vehicle. No disturbances here." "Officer," Karen sang, stepping between us like she was the conductor of this scene. "Thank you for coming. He's been aggressive and refuses to comply with community regulations. That camera," she announced it like a hazard sign, "records children." The younger cop's eyes flicked to Maya's phone. He took in the quiet crowd, the tidy yards, the way drama in places like this always wears a polite face. He looked back to me, measuring. "License and registration, please," the older officer said. "Routine smooth as a well-worn page." "Of course." I moved slowly, narrating each motion because habits keep everyone safe. Reaching for my wallet. With my right hand. "Registration is in the glove box. I'll get it when you're ready." He nodded, the small permission that means more than it looks. I handed over my driver's license first. My name. My address. The ordinary credentials of an ordinary neighbor. The officer glanced, then held out his palm without looking away. Trained, steady. Karen hovered, a moth craving the flame. "Ask him about the equipment," she urged. "Ask him why he needs it. Ask him what agency he thinks he works for." The officer's gaze flicked to me, a question simmering under professional stillness. "Do you work in security, sir?" "See." Wind lifted. A storm line rumbled somewhere beyond the freeway. Porch lights hummed. My SUV ticked softly as the engine cooled, a metronome for a moment that was about to split into 2 versions of reality. Karen's panic and the truth. "Registration?" the officer prompted gently. "Absolutely," I said, reaching to open the glove box now. I pulled the latch. The glove box sighed open on a cushion of paper and lint. I set the registration on the dash. My hand hovered for a fraction longer than necessary, then withdrew. Not yet. Not here. Not like this. You don't spill gasoline unless you're ready. to light a match. Behind the officers, neighbors leaned in. Karen smiled like she'd already won a prize. Maya's camera didn't blink. "Thank you," the older cop said, taking the paper. He turned to his partner. "Run it." While the younger officer retreated to the cruiser, the older one kept his eyes on me. Not hostile, not suspicious, just curious. He'd seen this dance before. He knew there's always a second story under the first. Karen folded her arms, triumphant. "You see," she told the crowd in a voice that floated just loud enough. "This is how communities stay safe. By acting." I could have let it ride. I could have let them run the plate, confirm the address, and end this as another petty HOA skirmish. But there are moments when you don't just end a skirmish. You end the war. Cleanly, publicly, so it doesn't start again. The cruisers. Radio crackled. The younger officer frowned at the screen, then looked up, confused. He whispered to his partner, who arched an eyebrow that said, "Interesting." Karen's smile faltered. I took a breath that felt like the calm surface of a deep lake, then met the older officer's eyes. "There's one more form of identification I can offer," I said quietly. "If you'd like to see it." His look sharpened. He gave the smallest nod, professional and private. "Go ahead." I reached into my wallet, past the license slot, past the grocery receipts and the punch card. For coffee, I never remembered to redeem. My fingers found the leather case. I brought it out slowly, holding it low and balanced on my palm, the way you'd offer a fragile truth. Karen leaned forward, curiosity warring with certainty. The leather flipped open with a soft, inevitable sound. The leather case opened like a door to another world. Inside, a polished crest gleamed under the streetlight. Federal seal, eagle wings, the words carved in metal that weighed more than Karen's clipboard ever could. Below it, my photo ID, laminated with all the official barcodes and markings that left no room for doubt. I held it steady, palm open, no theatrics. Just enough for the officers to read, not enough for Karen to snatch. The older officer's jaw tightened with recognition. His voice carried the subtle shift from civilian courtesy to professional respect. "Federal Interior Chief?" he asked, low but clear. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Bureau of Land and Interior Enforcement, federal clearance. That vehicle is a government-issued SUV. Surveillance equipment is authorized. Everything's legal, documented, and secure." Silence snapped across the cul-de-sac. The neighbors stiffened like statues in a museum. Even the sprinklers down the block seemed to pause mid-cycle. Karen's pen froze above her clipboard. Her smile collapsed in on itself, confused, struggling. "Federal?" "That's correct," the officer said, confirming what she didn't want to hear. His eyes softened with a flicker of apology toward me. "Sir, I appreciate your cooperation." Maya zoomed in with her phone. The golden retriever barked once, almost like it understood drama when it saw it. Karen recovered fast, too fast. She laughed, high and sharp like a broken violin string. "This is ridiculous. He's bluffing. Anyone can flash a badge they bought online. That's not proof. He's trying to intimidate the board." I closed the wallet slowly, slipping it back into my pocket like I'd just reholstered a weapon. My voice stayed calm, but the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. "You made a false report to 911, Karen. You claimed there were weapons. You escalated a situation with misleading language. Do you know what that's called?" The younger officer reappeared from the cruiser, looking rattled. "Lieutenant, dispatch flag the plate. Vehicle is registered to Federal Fleet." Matches his ID. Clearance level. It's high. Karen's laughter stuttered, faltered. Her eyes darted around at the neighbors, once allies, now skeptics. Their expressions had changed. They weren't nodding anymore. They weren't buying tickets to her show. Mr. Patel coughed into his fist, but it sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. The older officer straightened, voice firm. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside." Karen blinked. "Step aside? But I called you. I'm the one. Protecting this neighborhood." "No, ma'am," he corrected gently but firmly. "You made a false statement to law enforcement. That's a serious matter." Maya whispered into her phone. "Oh my God, she's done." Karen's face turned a shade that didn't exist in any HOA-approved paint palette. She jabbed her finger at me again, desperate. "You don't understand. He's dangerous. Look at that car. That equipment. He's watching us." I took a slow step forward, not threatening, just undeniable. "The cameras in my vehicle monitor federal property sites, not backyard barbecues. And if you want to talk about danger, Karen, let's talk about how you weaponize the police against your own neighbor for personal control." The crowd shifted. Someone muttered, "She always goes too far." Another. Finally, someone stood up to her. Karen's eyes widened, hearing the shift in her empire. She spun toward the crowd. "He's lying. He's twisting everything. You know me. I protect our standards. I keep us safe from—" Her voice cracked before she could finish. The older officer turned back to me, respectful. "Chief Cole, do you want to file a report on this?" Karen gasped, like she'd just been pushed underwater. I let the question hang in the air. The power wasn't in answering. It was in watching Karen realize she no longer controlled the narrative. The clipboard slipped in her grip. The pen clattered on the driveway. The neighbor's eyes weren't on her anymore. They were on me, and for the first time since I moved into Willow Ridge, I felt the balance of power tilt back where it belonged. The streetlight buzzed above, throwing long shadows across the cul-de-sac. The neighbors whispered in clusters, their eyes darting between Karen's flushed face and the badge that had just dismantled her authority. But Karen wasn't finished. "People like her never are. You can't do this to me," she snapped, voice pitched too high, teetering between rage and desperation. "I'm the HOA president, acting president, and I have the authority here." She jabbed her finger at the officers like she was issuing orders. "This is my jurisdiction, not his." The older officer raised an eyebrow. Calm, patient, but firm. "Ma'am, your authority doesn't supersede federal law." Her mouth twisted. She wasn't used to hearing no. Not from anyone. "Listen to me," Karen hissed, lowering her voice as though confiding in the officers. "He's dangerous. You don't understand who he really is. People like him, they infiltrate communities. They watch us. They take notes. What if he's spying on our children?" The words hit the crowd like a spark in dry grass. Parents stiffened. Maya gasped softly behind her phone. For a heartbeat, the narrative wavered, threatened to shift back into Karen's grip. That was her move. She knew exactly how to weaponize fear. But fear only works if no one answers it. I took a step forward, planting my voice where it couldn't be ignored. Calm, measured, but with the kind of gravity that made lies crumble. My work protects federal lands, infrastructure, and resources. Not children, not neighbors, not barbecues, not backyard gossip. I've undergone the highest levels of background checks, more than anyone here, including Karen. If I were untrustworthy, I wouldn't be standing here with this badge. The younger officer nodded faintly, confirming my words without speaking. Them. Karen's eyes darted wildly. She wasn't winning. Not yet. Not unless she escalated further. She pulled her phone from her pocket and waved it like a sword. Fine. If the police won't do their job, I'll call the regional director. We'll have his vehicle impounded and his clearance checked. We'll see how much authority he has when Homeland Security arrives. The neighbors stirred, half shocked, half exhausted. Mr. Patel muttered under his breath, "She's digging her own grave." I held my ground. Karen, making false reports to federal agencies is a crime. Every word you say now is being recorded. By me, by this dash cam, by half the neighbors here, and by these officers' body cams. Every lie you speak is evidence. Her phone trembled in her hand. For the first time, I saw the crack beneath her armor. The older officer finally stepped in, voice sharp with authority. "That's enough, ma'am. You've escalated this far enough. Put the phone down." Now. Karen froze, mouth open like a door she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through. Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered the phone. The silence that followed was deafening. Neighbors exhaled. The golden retriever barked once, almost like punctuation. Karen's empire of intimidation had collapsed in real time, and everyone saw it. But I knew Karen, and I knew this wasn't over. She wouldn't just lick her wounds and disappear. She'd plot, she'd scheme, she'd come back. The police had steadied the situation. For the moment. The badge was back in my wallet. The cruiser idled with its lights dimmed, and neighbors murmured in cautious relief. But Karen's silence wasn't peace. It was the quiet before her counterattack. Sure, enough. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Patel. Just 3 words. Emergency HOA meeting. The board had been summoned. Karen's last fortress. I knew what was waiting. Whispers, accusations, an ambush disguised as democracy. If the street was her stage, the clubhouse was her courtroom. The Willow Ridge clubhouse smelled of lemon cleaner and burnt coffee, a place where fake civility thrived under fluorescent lights. Folding chairs faced the long oak table where the board sat. 4 members, all worn down by months of Karen's domination. And at the center of it, Karen herself, perched like a queen on a throne she'd declared, not earned. The room was full. Neighbors packed the chairs, lining the walls, clutching HOA notices like protest signs. Maya had her phone again, slyly recording from her lap. Karen cleared her throat, sharp enough to silence the hum of chatter. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, voice sweetened with poison. "As your acting president, it is my duty to inform you that we have a serious threat within our community. A man hiding behind a so-called federal badge. A man surveilling our homes." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen leaned into them, eyes glittering. "He's not here as a neighbor," she continued. "He is here as an operative. His vehicle is government property, equipped with cameras. He is gathering intelligence on us, and if we allow it, our privacy, our safety, our very way of life is at risk." She paused, letting fear soak into the air. "We must vote tonight to restrict government vehicles from parking visibly within Willow Ridge, and we must vote to censure Daniel Cole for violating our trust." Her gavel, an actual gavel she'd ordered online, struck the table. "The motion is open." Whispers surged. Eyes turned to me. The trap was set. I stood slowly, the room tilting toward my presence. Calm, controlled. But inside I could feel the tension coil, ready to spring. "Neighbors," I began, my voice carrying in the cramped space. "I need you to hear the truth before fear makes your choice for you." Karen smirked, folding her arms. "Here comes the speech." I ignored her. "Yes, I am a federal interior chief. My work involves protecting land, infrastructure, and resources. That SUV you see parked in my driveway? It's not spying on your backyards. It's not filming your children. It's secured surveillance for federal projects, none of which involve Willow Ridge." The board shifted, uneasy. They weren't convinced yet. Karen's poison ran deep. So I leaned in, voice sharp as glass. What is a threat to this neighborhood is when someone abuses authority, when someone calls 911 with lies that could have ended in violence, when someone drags our police into personal vendettas. That is more dangerous than any badge I carry. Karen slammed her palm on the table. Lies, deflection. She turned to the board, frantic. "Don't let him spin this. He's manipulating you, just like he manipulated those officers last night." "Last night is on record," I cut in, steady. "Police body cams, dispatch calls, half this neighborhood filming." I gestured toward Maya, who lifted her phone slightly, confirming the truth. Every word Karen spoke, every false claim, is documented. The room shifted. Neighbors murmured louder now, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was anger. Mr. Patel stood from his seat in the second row. His voice, usually soft, carried steel tonight. "I was there. He told the truth. She lied, and we're all tired of it." The floodgates opened. "She threatened to fine me for hanging a flag. She made my kids cry over sidewalk chalk. She tried to ban my dog. She told me my husband's truck was unsightly." Voices piled on, each story another, stone against her collapsing throne. Karen's face blanched as her army turned into her jury. The board chair, a quiet woman named Elena who rarely spoke above a whisper, finally cleared her throat. "It seems," she said carefully, "that the community has spoken. Perhaps the motion should not be about Mr. Cole." Karen's eyes widened. "What?" Elena's voice hardened. "Perhaps the motion should be about your position, Karen." The room froze, then erupted. Applause, cheers. A chant even started, "Vote her out! Vote her out!" Karen's gavel shook in her hand. She slammed it down once, twice, desperate to regain control. But the sound was drowned beneath the voices of the very people she thought she ruled. And for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Real fear. Not of me, not of the police, but of losing the one thing she worshipped above all else. The Willow Ridge boardroom was electric. Every chair, every window, every microphone seemed to hum with anticipation. Karen stood at the center, chest puffed, trying to radiate confidence, but the lines around her eyes betrayed the panic creeping. Elena, the board chair, raised her hand to call the meeting to order. "We are here to vote on the motions presented, both regarding the alleged conduct of Daniel Cole and the position of acting president, Karen Thompson." Karen's mouth opened, ready to protest, but she was met with the hard stares of the board, members, and the quiet murmurs of the neighborhood. "I think we all know which vote matters most," Mr. Patel said, standing. "We've all seen what's happened over the past year. Let's be honest. Karen's actions have caused division, fear, and stress. It's time for accountability." Karen's face paled. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked like a branch. "Under snow. You can't. This is—" "Silence," Elena said, firm and final. "We will vote. All in favor of removing Karen Thompson from the position of acting HOA president, please raise your hands." 1 hand, 2 hands, 3. Then the wave began. Neighbors in the audience rose too, encouraged by the board's lead. The number grew, unstoppable, undeniable. Karen's army of allies, once confident, faltered and shrank under the weight of the collective voice. Karen's clipboard fell from her trembling hands. She lunged forward, but it was too late. The vote had been cast. The room erupted. Cheers, whispers, relieved laughter, the sound of a neighborhood finally free from a tyrant's grip. Karen's eyes locked on mine. Fury, humiliation, and something else, an unspoken promise that this wasn't over. But she didn't move. The room's energy had shifted entirely. I stayed seated, calm, hands resting on my knees. My presence alone seemed to anchor the room. Karen's attempts at intimidation had failed spectacularly. The badge hadn't just protected me. It had protected the truth. Elena stood, gavel in hand. Motion passes. Karen Thompson is removed from all HOA duties effective immediately. We will proceed to elect a new board member to replace her. Let's restore order and civility. Karen opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. She looked around at the neighbors who had once followed her lead, now silently condemning her. Even Mr. Patel gave her a sympathetic shake of the head, as if pity alone could remind her of her mistakes. "Daniel," Elena said, turning toward me, "thank you for coming forward. Your actions, though extraordinary, reminded us of our responsibility. As a community, we appreciate your professionalism and calm." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I did what any responsible neighbor would do. The badge didn't make me special. It just gave me the tools to prevent a small conflict from escalating into something serious. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She had lost everything: power, credibility, control. For the first time in years, she was just another homeowner in Willow Ridge. And for the neighborhood, the evening felt like a rebirth. But I knew Karen's story didn't end here. Tyrants don't vanish. They regroup, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. That night, the Willow Ridge streets were quiet, almost deceptively peaceful. Porch lights glowed like calm sentinels, and the air smelled faintly of wet grass and late-blooming flowers. Neighbors had returned home, but I knew Karen wasn't, retreating quietly. She never did. A knock echoed on my door just as I was about to settle in for the evening. I opened it to find her, standing there in a trench coat despite the mild weather, her face pale but determined. "Daniel," she hissed, voice low but urgent. "You think tonight is over? You think a board vote fixes anything? I'll make sure. Your reputation is destroyed. Your badge won't protect you from everyone." I stepped aside, letting her in enough to talk but keeping my distance. Calm. Calculated. I had learned early in my career that desperation is loud, but predictability is quiet. "Karen," I said evenly, "you've had your chance. The board voted. You've lost your authority. I don't want confrontation, but if you continue down this path, the consequences won't be friendly." She scoffed, almost laughable in her fury. "Consequences? I create consequences. You think flashing a badge intimidates me? You think your little speeches impress anyone?" She moved closer, brandishing a stack of HOA violation notices and emails she had drafted in a frenzy. Her plan was clear: bombard the board and neighbors with legal threats, sow chaos, and attempt to force me into submission. I listened, letting her run. Every word she spoke was another thread in the trap she was weaving for herself. Finally, I cut in. "Karen, all of that, every email, every notice, is on record. False claims, harassment, intimidation. You're escalating from petty HOA disputes to real legal jeopardy. Her eyes flickered, a momentary crack in her armor. You can't. I can, I said softly, letting the weight of my experience and credentials fill the room. Because I don't just carry a badge, I know how the law protects those targeted by harassment. Every attempt you make against me or this neighborhood strengthens my position and exposes yours. Karen froze, realizing her desperation was her undoing. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Maya, who had followed the confrontation, from a safe distance with her camera, captured Karen's exact moment of defeat. The video alone would circulate through the neighborhood faster than any rumor Karen could manufacture. Finally, Karen slammed the door behind her and stalked off into the night, her plans for intimidation dissolving under the quiet certainty of truth and authority. Neighbors peeked from windows and porches, some whispering, some clapping quietly, all relieved that the storm had passed. For now. I locked the door, exhaled, and leaned against it. The war wasn't over. People like Karen never fully surrender, but tonight was a decisive victory. One small step for justice, one massive lesson for tyranny. And deep down, I knew this would be the night that made Willow Ridge realize some battles require more than rules. They require presence, calm, and the courage to stand firm when everyone else wavers. The next morning, Willow Ridge felt different. Not peaceful, not safe, but electric, like the calm before a second storm. Karen had retreated after her late-night attempt, but she wasn't gone. Tyrants never truly vanish. They mutate. Mid-morning, I started hearing the first hints. Whispers in yards, phone calls in hushed tones, text alerts from neighbors. Did you hear what he really does? He's watching us. I heard it's federal surveillance on private property. The rumor mill churned faster than I could move. Karen's weapon wasn't authority anymore. It was perception. The very same neighbors who had cheered last night now hesitated, their uncertainty fueled by half-truths and fear. I walked outside, calm, letting the neighbors see me. I knew visibility was key. People trust what they see. My SUV sat in the driveway, perfectly ordinary, gleaming in the morning sun. I waved to a few familiar faces. "Good morning," I said, warm but firm. My tone said, "I am here. I am calm. I am trustworthy." Karen's whispers couldn't compete with reality, but she tried. That afternoon, she appeared on porches and driveways, the clipboard in hand, spreading carefully worded lies. "You know, Daniel's cameras might be watching the children," she said to Mrs. Harris, leaning in with a conspiratorial tone. "We don't know what he's recording. The board can't control him." Neighbors' eyes flickered to me, uncertain, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I addressed the growing crowd, voice projecting just enough to cut through the haze. "Neighbors," I said, hands raised. "Let's be clear. I live here. I have authority in my federal capacity, yes, but I do not monitor private property or personal lives. My vehicle, my equipment, my work, none of it threatens this neighborhood." Karen's mouth opened, probably to interrupt, but I continued. "I've been transparent. I've answered every question, complied with every request, and even involved local law enforcement to confirm my actions. This neighborhood thrives on trust. Lies and fear will not be tolerated." Some neighbors nodded, relieved. Others looked unsure, torn between old habits of fear and new evidence of truth. Karen's frustration was visible. She clenched her fists, realizing the whispers weren't sticking the way she intended. She needed more. Something dramatic. Something public. Something impossible to ignore. She stepped forward, raising her voice. If you trust him so much, why doesn't he allow inspections? Why isn't the board fully aware of what's in that vehicle? Think about it. What if he's hiding something? A murmur went through the crowd, but I smiled lightly, the calm before the storm of revelation. Karen, you just proved my point. I've been transparent from the beginning. The law, the board, the community, they have all had access to my credentials and records. Anything beyond that is your imagination. The shift was subtle but decisive. Eyes began turning away from Karen, scanning me for reassurance. Her words, powerful in isolation, were losing their effect when weighed against proof. Calm, authority, and presence. Karen's whispering machine was sputtering hard, and I knew exactly when to strike next. Soon her influence would crumble completely, and the neighborhood would see the full truth. The game wasn't over, but the tides were turning. That evening, the cul-de-sac hummed with tension. Neighbors lingered on their porches, peeking through blinds, and the air was thick with anticipation. Karen had called yet another impromptu meeting at the edge of the community park, claiming urgent matters regarding security concerns. I arrived as calm as ever, prepared for whatever theatrics she had planned. Maya trailed behind, recording discreetly. My SUV parked conspicuously like a lighthouse beacon, solid, immovable, and truthful. Karen stood at the center of the small crowd, clipboard in hand, face flushed red, eyes darting. She was attempting her usual performance, the fearless leader, warning everyone of danger. But this time, the effect was weaker. The whispers had already begun to turn against her. I've called this meeting because Daniel Cole's vehicle and surveillance equipment are a threat, she shouted, gesturing toward my SUV. We must act before it's too late. A neighbor stepped forward, arms crossed. Karen, we've seen the board vote. We've seen the officers confirm his credentials. What more do you want? Karen's glare turned toward me, wild. Do you think that badge makes you untouchable? One day someone like me will expose you and you'll regret standing above us all. I took a slow step forward, calm and deliberate. Karen, it's not the badge that matters. It's truth. I live here, I work here, and everything I do is lawful. Your attempts to intimidate and manipulate the community are over. The evidence is clear. Your influence is gone. A murmur ran through the crowd. Karen's confidence faltered for the first time in front of an audience. Her hands shook slightly, and the clipboard quivered as if it, too, sensed defeat. This isn't over, she shouted, but her voice carried less weight. The neighbors' reactions were no longer fear, but incredulity. You'll see. You won't get away with this. Karen, I said softly, steady, voice slicing through the chaos. It is over. You've had every opportunity to act responsibly, and you chose lies and intimidation. This community has spoken. The board has spoken, and the law is clear. Any further harassment will have consequences beyond HOA disputes. Karen froze, realizing the full weight of what I had said. She looked around at the neighbors, their faces no longer revering her but watching with scrutiny, judgment, and disappointment. Her final act of defiance crumbled as the reality sank in. The community would no longer follow her lead. Her whispers would no longer control them, and her authority had evaporated completely. She stormed off, muttering threats under her breath, but the audience had shifted entirely. Karen's reign of fear had ended. and the truth, the quiet, unwavering authority of presence, law, and transparency, had won. Neighbors exhaled, relief palpable. Some approached me, nodding, thanking me for standing firm. Others simply watched, processing the spectacle that had dismantled a neighborhood tyrant. The night closed with a rare serenity in Willow Ridge. The lights of the cul-de-sac glimmered softly, shadows stretching across freshly mown lawns, signaling an era where reason, truth, and courage prevailed over intimidation. The following week, the atmosphere in Willow Ridge was tense but quiet. Karen had retreated into her house, the kind of retreat that wasn't defeat, it was calculation. But the ripples of her actions were catching up to her. I received a call from the HOA's legal counsel, confirming that multiple formal complaints had been filed against Karen: false reporting to law enforcement, harassment, intimidation of neighbors, and attempts to manipulate board decisions. Each claim was documented, time-stamped, and backed by evidence: the 911 call, police body cam footage, dash cam recordings, and even Maya's neighborhood videos. Karen had crossed a line she couldn't manipulate away. The board convened an emergency session with legal representatives present. Karen was summoned, but she refused to attend, claiming personal distress and unfair treatment. This, of course, only escalated the situation. Letters were sent to her residence detailing potential fines, penalties, and the legal implications of continued harassment. The HOA's attorney explained that false reports to law enforcement and threats toward neighbors could be treated as criminal offenses. I didn't need to intervene personally. The law, documentation, and community unity did the work. Karen's network of fear had evaporated, leaving her isolated and exposed. Neighbors began speaking more openly, sharing stories of intimidation, harassment, and manipulation that Karen had used over the years. The board compiled these into an official report, making clear that her actions were not only unethical, but potentially criminal. Even the local police followed up with Karen regarding her repeated false reports and attempts to manipulate emergency services. The officers, who had witnessed the original incident, provided statements corroborating the events of that night. Karen's social standing in the neighborhood had crumbled. Her emails went unanswered. Calls were ignored. Attempts to intimidate neighbors or rally support failed spectacularly. The very people who once feared her now quietly celebrated the order returning to Willow Ridge. It was a turning point, not just for me, but for the community. Justice wasn't just delivered. It was visible, undeniable, and collective. Karen's reign of fear had ended, replaced with accountability, law, and clarity. For the first time in years, Willow Ridge felt safe and united. And while Karen would always linger in the memories of some, her power, the illusion of control she'd wielded, was gone forever. With Karen sidelined and legal actions underway, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Porches lit up at dusk, neighbors waved without hesitation, and the usual hum of lawnmowers and sprinklers returned. Willow Ridge felt alive, not tense. The next board meeting, the community voted to officially replace Karen as HOA president. The new leadership focused on transparency, fairness, and rebuilding trust. Meetings were no longer stages for intimidation. They became forums for dialogue. Neighbors approached me with gratitude, but I reminded them that the true victory wasn't mine. It was theirs. Courage, unity, and standing for truth had dismantled fear. Even Maya, camera in hand, said quietly, "You didn't just protect your rights. You protected all of us." Karen, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale. Her threats, rumors, and intimidation attempts were documented for the HOA and, if necessary, legal authorities. Her influence evaporated, leaving her isolated, powerless, and watched closely by the very community she tried to control. I resumed my routine, quietly, calmly, visibly present, but no longer under threat. The SUV sat in its driveway as a symbol of lawful authority and restraint, not intimidation. The neighborhood learned a powerful lesson. Fear is temporary. Truth, transparency, and accountability last. As the sun set, Willow Ridge glowed in serenity. Laughter floated from backyards, dogs ran freely, and sometimes the strongest battles are fought not with force, but with truth, calm, and courage. Willow Ridge found its peace, and a lesson was learned. Intimidation can never win when a community stands united.